Tuesday morning in Scotland, and we're inching closer to the weekend that every Celtic fan has been waiting for. The Scottish Cup final. You can feel the buzz building up across the country. The atmosphere is picking up, the discussions are getting louder, and every little piece of news is being dissected like it's the last clue before the big reveal. And in the middle of all this noise, somehow, it's a strangely fascinating time to be Jeff Schlupp. Yes, that's right, Jeff Schlupp. A player who isn't exactly in the headlines every week, not really cemented in the starting 11, and definitely facing some uncertainty when it comes to his long-term role. But even with all that in the background, Schlupp is now staring down the possibility of doing something incredibly rare, winning both the FA Cup and the Scottish Cup in the span of just 2 weeks. Just yesterday, Schlupp casually dropped a photo on Instagram showing off his FA Cup winners medal with Crystal Palace. That's right, Crystal Palace, the team that went all the way this year in the English competition. And yeah, some folks may have forgotten that he was even part of that squad. His involvement, a solid 13 minutes in the third round against Stockport County. But rules are rules, and medals don't come with a minimum minutes requirement. If you're in the squad and the team lifts a trophy, you get a medal. So fair play to him. He's got one major cup medal in his pocket, and he might just grab another this weekend if things go Celtic's way. Now I know what you're thinking. Has anyone else ever pulled this off FA Cup and Scottish Cup in the same season? Off the top of my head, I can't name anyone, but surely there's someone buried deep in football history who managed it. Still, even if it's not entirely unprecedented, it's the kind of quirky accolade that makes for a brilliant pub quiz question. And it gets people talking. Well, at the very least, it got me talking. Because that's not something you see every day. One weekend, you're part of a squad lifting England's oldest cup competition. And the next, you're fighting for silverware north of the border. Not bad for a guy who's barely gotten game time. Schlupp was also spotted back at his old stomping grounds, the King Power Stadium, over the weekend. Leicester City put together a nice little celebration for Jamie Vardy, marking what looks like his final home appearance for the club. Vardy's been a legend there, no question, and now the talk is that he's on his way to Celtic this summer. Yes, that's what's circulating, and while it might still feel a little surreal, it seems like it's actually happening. Seeing Schlupp there among former Leicester greats sharing in Vardy's farewell moment added a sentimental touch to an already interesting narrative. Now while we're talking about all things Celtic and building toward the cup final, let's take a minute to run through some other developments. A bit of a news roundup, if you will. Most of it ties back to Celtic one way or another, even if loosely, but there were a couple of managerial shifts in the Scottish Premiership that caught the eye. First, Derek McInnes is now officially the manager of Hearts. That's right, he's taken over at Tynecastle and already made it clear he wants to change the vibe. His words, he wants to make sure teams stop enjoying themselves when they come to play at Tynecastle. Strong words. Whether that turns into results, well, that's anyone's guess. It could go either way, to be honest. My hunch is that he might get a decent start, find his footing in the first season, but after that, the pressure could start to mount if the results don't follow. And then there's Dundee, who've just parted ways with Tony Docherty after finishing in 10th. Now on its own, that's not exactly Celtic breaking news. But here's the interesting bit. Sean Maloney is apparently in the mix for that job. And not just as a rumor, he's reportedly interested in speaking with the Dundee board. Maloney, of course, has a bit of a Celtic legacy, and for a while there, people were tossing his name around as a potential future Celtic manager. That talk has definitely died down, but still it's intriguing. Last time we saw him in a managerial role, he was at Wigan, I believe up until around February or March this year. Before that, he had a stint at Hibs. Results haven't exactly screamed next big thing, but Scottish football has a way of recycling talent, and maybe this is a chance for him to rebuild. Now, back to the game that matters this week. The Scottish Cup final. Celtic have confirmed that all tickets are officially gone. Not a single one left. So for those who are holding out hope for a last-minute general sale, that door is now closed. I'm admittedly a bit out of the loop when it comes to the exact ticketing procedures, but from what I can gather, it's been absolute chaos trying to get a seat for this one. And that makes sense. This is the culmination of the season, a major showdown at Hampton Celtic versus Aberdeen. There's been a lot of chatter online about whether the allocation is a proper 50-50 split. I'm not convinced. Aberdeen's reportedly been given around 20,000 tickets, and if Celtic received the exact same, that would mean there are at least 10,000 tickets floating around for corporate use or hospitality. That seems like a lot. My guess, the lower tier might be split evenly, but once you get to the upper sections, especially the main stand, it's probably dominated by Celtic fans. If you've somehow managed to secure a ticket and you're sitting on the Aberdeen side, don't let me know. I'm genuinely curious how the distribution played out. Because from what I've seen, there are more than a few fans surprised by how hard it's been to get Celtic tickets. And yet that difficulty also speaks to how massive this occasion is. Full stadium, high stakes, historic venue. It's everything you want in a cup final. As for the starting 11, it feels like most people already have a strong sense of what Brendan Rodgers is going to go with. I'd say 9, maybe even 10 of the players who started against St. Mirren on Trophy Day are guaranteed to start again on Saturday. Kasper Schmeichel will be in goal. The back four. That's likely to be Alistair Johnston, Cameron Carter, Vickers, Liam Scales, and Greg Taylor. In midfield, Callum McGregor is a lock, and so is Matt O'Reilly. That leaves one spot up for grabs. The real debate is whether it goes to Paulo Bernardo or Luke McCowan. Now, if we look at the front three, Dyson Maeda will surely start on the left, Adam Ida will lead the line through the middle, and then you've got that right wing position, a spot that in theory belongs to Nicholas Kuhn. But here's where things get interesting. James Forrest has suddenly re-entered the conversation, and I'm not just talking about sentiment here. His performances lately have been genuinely impressive. Whether it was that hour-long stint against St. Mirren or the cameo on Trophy Day, Forrest looks sharp. Not just effective, but confident. He's playing with rhythm, with intent, and crucially with experience. This is a guy who's featured in multiple cup finals, scored in a few of them too. And even if most were League Cup finals, that kind of pedigree matters. So I'll say it now. I'd start James Forrest. It just feels like one of those fairy tale moments where everything aligns. A veteran player hitting form at just the right time, potentially getting one more big night under the lights at Hampden. Brendan Rodgers was asked about Forrest post-match last weekend, and I expected the usual deflection. Something along the lines of, "We know what James can do, nothing new here." But Rodgers actually gave a bit more away. He acknowledged that rotation was intentional, that he wanted to see where everyone wasn't physically and mentally ahead of the final. That might not sound like much, but for Rodgers it's telling. He's a manager who values data consistency and preparedness. And if Forrest is ticking all those boxes, don't be surprised to see him out there from the first whistle. Now picking up from where we left off, let's go a bit deeper into that midfield question. Paulo Bernardo or Luke McCowan? Honestly, it's not as straightforward as it might have seemed a few weeks ago. Bernardo didn't have his best performance against St. Mirren. He looked a bit off the pace, struggled to find rhythm, and generally didn't stamp his authority on the match. But then again, the entire team was a little flat that day, so it might be harsh to single him out. What makes this even more tricky is that McCowan, while arguably in better form, doesn't yet have the same reputation for stepping up in big games. Bernardo, for all his inconsistency, has that ability to rise when the lights are brightest. Just think back to last season when he helped carve out the winning goal against Rangers with a piece of clever play. Staying on his feet, keeping his composure, and creating something out of nothing. That moment sticks with you, and maybe that's why if it were up to me, I'd lean towards starting Bernardo on Saturday. McCowan is a great option off the bench, especially if we need energy and directness in the second half. But when the game is tight from the start, when every decision and touch is magnified, sometimes you want the guy who's already proven he can handle it. I'd trust Bernardo in that scenario, even if only slightly. These are the kinds of marginal decisions that could shape the outcome. Elsewhere, there's been some unexpected chatter about Matt O'Reilly. Not just in Celtic circles. Apparently, Brighton have placed him on their radar for a possible summer transfer. That came from a tweet by Fabrizio Romano, the kind of insider who doesn't usually get things too far off. But then, oddly enough, the tweet disappeared, deleted, gone. That naturally raised eyebrows. Was it a mistake, a miscommunication, or maybe something more strategic behind the scenes? Either way, what matters from a Celtic point of view is that there's a reported selling clause attached to O'Reilly's deal. If Brighton sell him, Celtic are set to receive a percentage, though whether it's off the total fee or just the profit Brighton make is unclear. With Jeremy Frimpong, it was the latter, and Brighton haven't exactly had a breakout financial success with O'Reilly just yet, so we'll see how that plays out. Still, it's one to keep an eye on over the summer. The guy's quality and his next move could end up benefiting Celtic in more ways than one. Speaking of players connected to Celtic's future, Kasper Schmeichel appeared on the club's official podcast recently. And while a good chunk of the episode focused on his past, his time at Leicester, his role with Denmark, he did touch on some important current dynamics within the team. One thing that stood out was how he spoke about Sinisalo, who covered for him while he was out of the team. Schmeichel kept it typically Nordic, calm, understated, respectful. He didn't gush or go over the top, but what he said carried weight. He wasn't surprised by how well Sinisalo performed because he sees it in training every day. That's the highest compliment, really. Consistency behind closed doors that translates on the pitch. But what really caught my attention was the way Schmeichel spoke about Scott Bain. Now Bain's role at Celtic these days is almost invisible to the public. He's third choice, rarely seen, never on the team sheet. Yet here was Schmeichel praising him for his attitude, his professionalism, the way he shows up to training every day and contributes, despite knowing he won't be on the pitch. That level of commitment is rare and massively undervalued. Joe Hart actually said something similar during his farewell last season, calling Bain the joy in the dressing room, always smiling, always keeping spirits high. And now Schmeichel is echoing that. For a player who rarely sees match action, Bain seems to have an outsized impact behind the scenes. And it's a reminder of how much squad dynamics matter, not just what happens on match day, but the energy throughout the week. The spirit in training, the unity off the pitch. And finally, there was an interesting and somewhat underreported quote from Brendan Rodgers over the weekend. He spoke briefly about his future at the club, specifically around his contract situation. He made it clear that while nothing has been formally decided, he's happy where he is, and that there are plans to have a conversation with Dermot Desmond during the off-season. It didn't sound like someone preparing to leave. Quite the opposite, actually. He talked about how much belief Desmond has shown in him, how that support has helped him thrive, and how settled he feels in Glasgow. Rodgers has said several times now that Scotland feels like home again, and really as long as Celtic continue to back him match his ambitions, particularly in Europe, then there's no reason to think he's heading out the door anytime soon. The landscape of European football has shifted since his first spell in charge. With the new format, Celtic are guaranteed at least 8 matches in the league phase of either the Champions League or Europa League. Much more opportunity to build momentum, make statements, and maybe even push into the knockout stages. That kind of platform could be key to keeping Rodgers fully invested. And based on everything he said lately, next season looks like just the next chapter, not the final one. With all the variables that go into managing a club like Celtic, the expectations, the pressure, the European aspirations, the presence of someone like Rodgers who knows the environment and feels connected to the club's vision becomes even more important. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Aberdeen's rising star Connor Barron has reportedly sparked fury among the Hoops faithful after a rumor surfaced suggesting he labeled Celtic a "we club" during a private conversation that somehow found its way into the public domain. While the quote remains unconfirmed officially, it has already sent waves through the Scottish football community, igniting fierce debate across fan circles and social media. The 21-year-old midfielder, known for his tenacity and sharp passing in the Don's engine room, has long been tipped as one of the most promising talents outside the old firm. But now he finds himself at the center of a media storm, not for his football, but for alleged words that many in Glasgow's East End consider fighting talk. The supposed remark came during a gathering with close friends, where Barron allegedly referred to Celtic as a wee club compared to what folk make them out to be. That line alone has been enough to spark outrage among Celtic supporters and draw a flurry of reactions online, with many demanding an apology or some form of clarification. Barron, who has been on the radar of several English Championship sides, has not commented publicly on the matter. Aberdeen, for their part, have declined to respond directly to the speculation, with sources close to the club suggesting the player is focused on the run-in to the end of the season and maintaining his top form. Celtic fans never shy to defend. Their club's stature have taken to social media in droves to defend their side's history and achievements. Some have mocked BARRON's own club's lack of recent silverware, while others have called for him to be put in his place the next time the two sides meet. Whether the quote is real or not, it's added fuel to an already fiery rivalry. With Aberdeen due to face Celtic again before the season's end, all eyes will be on Connor Barron, not just for what he does with the ball at his feet, but for how he handles the pressure off it. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.